So the title of my part of the presentation is called Group Work. And the idea with this is that I think that working together can be something that's very challenging and puts everyone in a pretty vulnerable spot, especially when you're learning something new and you're already in a vulnerable place. So I wanted to share some observations with you that I've had through working with other team members on my own projects and see, if they resonate with you, just give you some things to think about as you are doing interpersonal work throughout the rest of this week. Um, so I think that collaboration of any sort is both beautiful and really hard. Specifically because within a dynamic, when you're collaborating with someone, some people in a collaboration are pointy and some are round. And that is to say, I think that the context that we all bring to this can lead some of us to feel very vulnerable and like we might not necessarily belong there, or that we need a lot of help and we feel bad about that. And other people to possibly unintentionally display a lot of expertise in a way that sort of punctures some other people's egos and just makes for a more difficult collaborative group session overall. Um, and I think that whether we come to a group as a pointy person or a soft round person can be highly context dependent. And so I just want to start this whole talk off with a little story about my context. So I got a formal training in computer and electrical engineering, and I've done a bunch of fun stuff with that throughout my career. So before being a technical education specialist, I helped design and write the compiler for a programming language that is used in the networking space and has a lot of adoption from like Intel and Cisco. I also designed their mascot, Packet the polar bear. Um, I've written code that is currently running in every Apple device that you use, from the watch to the MacBook to the remote for your Apple TV. They all run the same kernel. It's all based on BSD. Um, and I've written firmware for LiDAR systems that made point clouds of San Francisco. So I've had a lot of technical fun throughout my career. And yet, after doing all of this, I found myself at a data science hackathon in December of 2018. And to my surprise, I was having a really bad time. This was one of the first times I had ever done work directly with data science, and I was thrown into a room with a bunch of dudes who were much older than I was, and I felt very out of place, like I had nothing to contribute to the situation, like I didn't know what I was doing, and like I was being a drain on people's resources and time. This is a selfie that I took in the middle of that hack week and sent to my partner over Facebook Messenger because I was feeling bad. Um, and so I wanted to tell you this story just to highlight that whether we think we're pointy or round, or whether we are actually behaving in a pointy or round way, these things don't define who you are and are not intrinsic properties of how you work with people. They're entirely dependent on the context that you bring to a given situation. And so the rest of what we're going to be talking about today is all focused on understanding the parts of you that are sharp and understanding the parts of you that are round, and being intentional about the way you display those parts so that you can work really well with your teammates. And so we're going to make a base assumption that we're all in this group session trying to be good neighbors to each other. And it's just hard to do so, and it takes practice. Even after having multiple sessions of just like knowing how to focus on group work and be the best teammate you can be, you're gonna do things that make you feel like you could have been, a better teammate, or that you aren't performing the most that you think you can. And that's totally fine. I think that all of this is really just a bunch of tips to seed thoughts that you can practice on throughout the week and throughout your careers. And I'm sure that you have your own group work hacks that I would love to hear from you too. If unfortunately we just don't have too much time this morning because you have a lot of cool technical work ahead of you. But these are the kind of things that I really welcome you to reach out and contact me with if you have any thoughts about what I'm going to be talking about. So, some hacks. The first one is a simple one mechanically. It's to use collective pronouns instead of singular pronouns. So, whenever you are telling someone something, instead of saying you, say we. Even if it's really just about stuff that one person is going to do, just bring that person into the group setting anyway. So instead of telling someone you need to learn or you need to install scikit-learn using pip, just say we need to install scikit-learn with pip. This would be in the context of screen sharing with someone and walking them through debugging, getting their environment set up. I guess this is something that, thanks to the heroic efforts of the SnowEx team, you don't have to do because of Jupyter Hub, but I'm sure you've encountered an environment setup situation in your life before where someone was telling you that you need to do something. Another example of this would be if you're walking through a process with somebody. Instead of asking them to open a new tab and search for the docs, you can say, let's open a new tab and search for the docs. Again, there's not too much depth to this hack. There's really not a lot of algorithm here. It's just find and replace wherever you see singular. See if it makes sense to make it plural. It might lend a sense of community support and teamwork, not just to your teammate, but to yourself too. This is a really good strat for just feeling like you're on the same team as someone. So slightly more uh, discretionary hack, something that takes a little bit more play to use effectively, is to share softly. And what I mean by that is that when we're working together, we have to ask each other a lot of questions to get on the same page. And we bring our own expertise that allows us to offer a whole lot of suggestions to someone while they're doing a technical task. The art that we have as teammates is to do all of this without making it feel like we're putting someone through a PhD qual or a job interview. And so some principles that I found help on my end to keep teammates feeling good as I offer suggestions and ask questions is to shift the subject of questions I ask off of the individual and onto the concept that we're tackling together. This way it keeps someone from feeling like they're being put on the spot, and it's more a discussion between colleagues about something that we both bring our own context to. I find that it's really useful to avoid absolutes and judgments of triviality. That is to say, saying whether something is difficult or easy, or whether something is a good or a bad technology. And I find it's really useful to, whenever I can, focus on subjective experience rather than objective fact. And so here are some examples of how you might do that. Instead of asking someone, do you know what Python is? Ways that you could ask this could be, what does Python mean to you? Or how familiar are you with Python? You're asking them to bring their full context to the situation rather than making it a binary decision that they have to assess whether they measure up or not. If you have to do something that you think is simple, like reading lines of text from a file in a programming language of your choice, instead of saying it's just a matter of reading a file, you could say, there are a lot of resources to help with reading lines from a file. Or reading lines of text from a file is a problem that I know we can tackle. I've been there before. Again, you are not posing something as a task that someone should know a lot about already and make someone ask themselves whether they do or not. You are offering support to the tasks that the team has to tackle together. One that comes up a lot, especially in teaching contexts, but also in contexts where teammates are explaining things to each other, is this impulse to ask whether something makes sense or not. And I found that almost always when I ask, does that make sense? That's because I want to know whether I explained something well. But what this can come across as is a question of whether someone is keeping up with the intellectual difficulty or not. So ways that you can ask the same question and get the same information is to shift it to a more touchy-feely form, like how do you feel about what I just talked about? What are your feelings about this? Again, making it less of a binary decision and more of an open spot for discussion. Or shifting the subject of the question onto you. Did I explain that well? Which is ultimately usually what you want, the information that you want out of asking this question. And then finally, this is a thing that I think shows up a lot with people who do a lot of technical work, is we gain a lot of opinions about whether something is good or bad. Um, and those opinions can come out as sort of brash suggestions about telling someone that they're doing something wrong and that they should be using NumPy to do a task. Or, whoops, or NumPy is a trash library. Um, it's very tempting to say these things because it's fun to shop talk. But if you are just meeting someone for the first time and you're all working on a technical project together that you have varying levels of expertise with, there are ways that you can soften the offering of these opinions. You can say things like, I've had a lot of good experiences with NumPy. Maybe we should try using that. Or I'm worried about NumPy because, and then offering context dependent information about why it was a bad choice for you at the time, rather than making an absolute declaration that this thing that someone tried using is a bad thing, which transitively, psychologically will just make us feel like we are bad things. I know that some of these sound like we're simple, soft beings, but the truth is we are relatively small, soft mammals, and we need care for when we're being handled. Which brings us to our last hack for today, which is to just appreciate the thought process of your teammates. Whenever we're working with each other, I encourage you to look for opportunities to identify and positively reinforce each other's working processes. Every question that someone asks is a good question. Every idea that someone has is worth giving props to. And every obstacle someone encounters is worth commiserating with. And I don't mean these as platitudes about the value of a question or an idea or an obstacle. I'm telling you these specific bullet points because I want you to notice someone is asking a question and tell them it's a good question, or tell them that an idea is cool, or tell them that an obstacle really sucks and you're sorry about it. And being specific where possible can really help make this feel genuine. Even if it seems like you're validating someone too minor or validating someone too often, or a point is too minor to give props to, it's really not. In the context of a hack week, we're all learning something new and we're working with people we haven't necessarily met before, and we can use all of the validation that we can get. Here's some examples of my favorite affirmations that I find myself returning to a lot. Whenever someone has a question, I love saying what I like about the question, especially the more basic the question, the more fundamental the concept it's usually addressing. That's a great question that you just asked. I think it brings up a really subtle point about XYZ. When I'm teaching someone about Python and they ask a question about how function calls work, I love pointing out that that brings up a really subtle point about the time that your code executes, because this is something that often goes unsaid when teaching someone a foundational concept. And I think that it's cool to bring up that someone is grappling with really great intellectual content. So praising the intellectual process of someone asking questions. When someone has an idea, I love just saying that I like it. If an idea is elegant or effective or on point, I love just expressing verbally, oh, I love this. I appreciate how elegant it is. Again, these seem like simple sentences, but I encountered this one at that hack week that I was feeling like garbage at. There was one person in particular who I'm still friends with today that I had met, and she was always directly expressing how she felt with very simple feelings word sentences like, oh, I'm happy, or oh, this is horrible, I feel sad about this. And I found that that was actually a really charming, inviting way to share her presence in the room. So I try to do this now whenever I'm working with someone. I try to observe how I'm feeling about what they're doing and sharing that with them. And conversely, when someone doesn't have ideas because they are stuck in a situation where they are solving a bug, I love commiserating with them. In particular, I find that rather than treating bugs like failure modes where you have to solve something that you have done wrong, bugs are opportunities to add to your internal knowledge database and debug things faster in the future. I really love telling people after they finish solving a horrible bug, wow, that was ridiculous. I'm going to remember that one. I'm going to draw on this in the future. If I am not around when they solve the bug, I love telling someone, oh, will you please tell me how you solved this after you do? Because I am sure that it's going to be helpful to me in the future. Commiseration is one of the best ways to build a sense of team rapport because y'all are surviving, honestly, a very hard and almost needlessly complex task of writing computer code together. Um, Computer code can get so arcane, and we are all champs for taking it on with each other. And more generally, just validating each other whenever you can, I think, is a good move. We see this in the music scene, like in hip hop music. The most square way of describing what a hype man is by quoting the Wikipedia article for it. But Wikipedia says a hype man in hip hop music is a backup rapper or singer who supports the primary rappers with exclamations and interjections, and who attempts to increase the audience's excitement with call and response chants. And here's one of the most famous hype men of all time, Flava Flav, Public Enemy. Um, I encourage you all to channel your inner Flava Flav because his job was to just make people feel like they belonged, make people feel like they were having a good time and like everyone was doing what they should be and everyone was acting at the top of their game. This is our opportunity to be hype men for each other because, you know, we can all use it, not just in this hack week, but in life. And so to recap, the tips that I am proposing to you are to use collective pronouns like we instead of you, to find ways to soften what you share with people, be it questions or experience, and to appreciate the thought process of your teammates and of yourself. And lastly, I just want to point out that all experience is highly subjective. And so, what your assumptions are about how your teammates are receiving your work and how your teammates feel about you is thankfully very disconnected from the actual reality of how your teammates feel about your work and your presence. And so, if you remember that we are all trying to be good neighbors and we all want each other to succeed, then hopefully that will take some of the pressure off of the fact that you may feel like you don't belong here or that you may feel like you are struggling to keep up. Because everyone is struggling at one point or another, and everyone thinks that we all are, you know, are success stories waiting to happen. So I am going to turn the slides over to Charley now, who's going to lead you through a really cool set of activities about scoping out how your teams are going to do work for the rest of the week. And I hope that you find these tips useful when you're beginning to have some of those really complex discussions about what your team priorities are and how you're going to split up work. I think it's going to be super fun, and I'm really excited to hear about what y'all do. Thank you.
Thanks, Naomi. Naomi, I apologize to everyone up front. My computer has become unstable, and the only way I can stabilize it is to close my laptop, and that means that I can't turn my camera on, and Naomi will be advancing the slides for me. Next slide. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about organizing considerations. I'm going to briefly touch on a couple of those and then give some extra ones like, and these organizing considerations are probably more useful for first-time project leads, but it also gives us some good reminders if we've been leading projects for a while. Next. We started yesterday by looking at when you're a project lead and a project team, all of you, right? It's important to find the right place to scope your project between being focused and specific and really narrow in scope, something that you can accomplish in this week together, or something more exploratory and open-ended that may be more related to your a science question. I popped into some of the breakout rooms yesterday and I saw you guys working on this. At this point, you may have already found that place for you. The main thing is to remember is the scoping really affects the time spent in mentoring and guiding others versus doing hacking. But if you're still struggling to find the right scope, just wanted to remind you that the Hack Week data scientist helpers are here to help. Next. Something you may have already bumped into as you're trying to scope out your project is, everyone that's attracted to your project is going to arrive at being skilled in some areas, maybe with a data set or a data science tool, and a novice in some other areas. These little yellow circles are not meant to be labels for individuals, but really about any moment in time, there's something that you may be skilled and an expert at or a novice at. And then how, given the task and what needs to be accomplished in a certain amount of time, what is the best way to organize around that? It could be, there's this spectrum, right? Between someone being really needing to do some autonomous coding on their own, some time by themselves, if they're skilled to go off and just let them run with that, right? And then it's the other side where you're interested and it's really more beneficial to be in more of a coaching or co-mentoring type of structure, organization. And then don't forget there's something in between that is, whether you're skilled or a novice, this paired coding, where you are, one person's got the keyboard and everyone's looking at the same screen and you're advancing the task together. That can actually, I have worked this way for quite a while, for 10 years. I did that with my colleague at NASA. We literally worked by the same computer for 10 years and it was amazing how productive we were. Next slide. We looked at this, briefly touched on this yesterday. It's like really being, listening to yourself and acknowledging your own needs around what do you really need to get? How do you like to work in order to feel like your time here in the Hack Week has been successful? What supports and motivates your learning? Somewhere in this spectrum of between needing really specific tasks and a project you really are motivated by checking things off the list and crossing the finish line together, needing some time to work out challenges and learn and kind of get messy on tasks and complete them on your own, versus, more of a relational that you don't care as much about completing the task as you do of getting to know each other and working and sharing what you learning and mentoring and working together. Before we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to put in a plug to Michelle. Could you go back, Naomi, just one slide, to Michelle down at the bottom, Michelle, who this activity, this slide was created literally maybe a week before this Hack Week, and it was based on some feedback that Michelle gave Anthony about what's it like to be a project lead. What do you struggle with? What's hard about it? And her feedback was that it's hard to balance hacking with taking care of your team's needs and that it would really be helpful to know what their definition of success is, because it's different for all of us. And so really this entire session this morning is based on our getting feedback from past hack weeks and project leads. It was created from feedback. And I know later Anthony is going to be asking some of you if you want to join a feedback session. And I just want to let you know that this is just an example of when you join a feedback session, it really does change how we do things, and we keep improving the hack weeks. Okay, next. So getting organized on your project team, find the best scope for your project, and then you're going to list out the tasks and the skills that are needed. This is really messy, so definitely don't be shy about reaching out for help to help you shape this part. You're going to invite the team members to indicate which tasks they're attracted to. They may be attracted to tasks that they really don't have a lot of skill about, but they want to jump right in. They're going to need some coaching, or vice versa. So invite them to indicate which ones they're attracted to working on and their skill level. And then you're going on the next slide, we'll show that in a second. You're going to invite them to share the team together where they are on that pyramid, so that you can see how your task and your desires and what you need, your learning and developmental needs, fit with the rest of the team and the tasks that need to be done. Next slide. So the slide deck for this particular session has been loaded up in the general Hack Week. This slide is meant to be interactive. You can take it, and these little smiley faces, you put your team member name down, and you can move it to inside of the triangle. And after you decide where after you're selfish and you really figure out what would be successful for you and where you land between these points, I invite you to just ask the team to bring their smiley face over and put it into the triangle, so together you can see what pattern emerges. Sometimes it's just way easier to visually see something than to have people describe it, and just getting a visual layout of the pattern, and then you will be able to assess whether or not the task can be met by everyone's learning and development needs. Next. And so just to kind of start wrapping up here, you're going to chat about the pattern distribution that you see in the triangle, like how well does your preferences map to the task to be done. From that, you're going to be able to see, are there any gaps? Like, do we actually need something in this project that we don't have skills to do? Reach out to the data scientist helper to help you figure that out, how to do that. And then also acknowledge that after you go through this process, there could be someone on your team that doesn't think, it's like, yeah, I don't think I'm really a fit. So if that happens, not to worry, just reach out to Hack Week Help or in a private DM to Anthony, and they can help you figure out quickly what project you might fit on. So after that, you're going to just pin down logistics, who's doing what's everybody's availability to hack alone or together, and how are you going to coordinate and communicate with each other, and then start hacking. Next slide. And the daily huddle, Anthony mentioned in the opening session, this is just a time that you get together briefly. Most teams, I think, do it in the morning, but you can do it at the end of the day. Just once a day, check in with each other to connect, coordinate, to get and give help to each other. find out, and usually that is about going around and having each person, giving them a few minutes just to briefly share, like, what are they working on that's going well? Like, what do I plan to do, or what do I want to learn next? And something that's slowing me down that I really like to have help with. And then the project lead or someone else on the team can help or coach with those needs. And with that, I think, Anthony, we're ready to move. I think that ends the session.